I don't want to dissent agreement with with Mark because
okay.
I know his history. So.
Let's go to our next question. It's from George Jovanovski.
Hi there. My question is for Mark. Mark, in a recent article, you spoke of your concern about the level of trade union control over the Labor Party. The union's control of the ALP is what led to the ousting of Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister and possibly fed into your decision to move on from the party. What should the ALP do to change the entrenched power of the unions, and who do you see as the new generation of Labor leaders who will drive a modernisation of the ALP and win back the trust from the public?
Well, on your second question, I think they're outside of the Parliament. Labor has some young, bright, diligent people in their 30s who hopefully one day will form the basis of a much better government than what we've got at the moment.
Could you name some of them?
Well, I'm not going to put the kiss of death on them by doing that. But your point about union influence goes to my earlier point about the sub-factions. In every state in the country, there's a union-based sub-faction, probably 5 or 6 of them, and then you multiply that by the 6 states and you end up with these 25-odd sub-factional warlords, again with a union base in the federal caucus, and it's institutionalised chaos. You just can't run a political party that way, let alone the government of the nation. And the answer to it is to ensure that everyone pre-selected to run as a Labor candidate is beholden not to factional bosses or union chiefs, to the people in their electorate, to have community pre-selections. And I think the other thing that needs to be done...
You mean with a kind of primary election system in the way the Americans have?
Yeah, be beholden to the local electorate, which is how the Labor Party started out in its origins in the late 1800s. It was a community-based organisation. It's become now an oligarchy with these union-based sub-factions. So you need to go back to the community roots as best you can. But I'd suggest the second reform, and that is to reflect on the fact that if they do change leader now, it will be the 6th leadership change in 12 years. Labor has got a revolving door of leadership where basically each of the last 5 leaders, I think it is, Crean, myself, Beazley, Rudd and now Gillard, have found the caucus to be ungovernable, to be unmanageable. And I think the caucus has lost the moral right to select the parliamentary leader. Labor should follow the example in other countries where it's selected by the party membership. And that, at long last, would stop the revolving door of leadership instability and would give the party a coherence and a chance to get behind someone for more than an average of 2 years, 6 leaders in 12 years, more than an average of 2 years, get some stability in place, some coherence. The current caucus has lost its moral right to pick the leader, and they should hand that over to the party membership.
I want to bring in Craig Emerson on this, but just before I do, a quick question to you, and that is, since you'd like to see union power broken somehow, and obviously through this primary system being your main objective, how do you actually do that if Labor is obliterated, as the first questioner suggested, in the coming elections? Because in the end, the real power will remain with the unions. There won't be very many Labor MPs. The unions will still be in control.
Well, out of crisis, you can get change. I don't think the party should be rewarding a saboteur. I think the party would be better advised to die on its feet than to live on its knees, as a matter of principle.
Even if that meant complete, well, really being reduced to a rump of a small number of MPs?
Tony, I give you this guarantee. History will not judge people well. History will not judge them well if they cave into sabotage and the threat of it in the future. Labor is always strongest when it stands on principle. And I get the feeling now that even reduced to a small parliamentary group, they've got a better chance of rebuilding for the future than giving in to the sort of bastardry that they've had to endure over the last 3 years from Kevin Rudd.
Craig Emerson, is that the way you look at things? It's better to die on your feet and live on your knees, or whatever it is.
I just don't share...
No, well, Peter Garrett sang it first, but I'm repeating the Garrett line.
Right.
The great working class man, Midnight Oil, that you are better off.
Actually, Craig is probably one of the few people on the panel, apart from Peter Garrett, who could probably sing that for us.
Well, but not tonight. Just in the wrap-up. In the wrap-up, I got a couple of chins, all right. Just
he's a Whaler wipeout man.
That's right.
Skyhawks man.
Divided the nation. Anyway.
In my family, it was very popular. My 10-year-old boy still does an impersonation of you.
Good taste. I always said that about the Latham kids.
Magnificent.
No, on this, I am nowhere near as pessimistic as you are, Tony. Other people on the panel, I am not.
I'd say the journalists in this case are being sort of more realistic. Pessimistic doesn't really come into it.
All they're doing is saying, oh, look, there's an opinion poll taken here and taken there. That means this is what's going to happen in September.
Well, look,
now,
I mean,
you asked me a question.
That might have been the case if you were only talking about public opinion polls. Now you're talking about your own internal polling in Victoria, which is devastating.
It's the same
devastating for Victorian MPs who thought they were somehow immune to this.
It's the same consideration. I do not know of a period where opinion polls taken in June tell you what's going to happen in September. The question is usually, if there were an election held next week, what would you do? Now, we have had difficulties. There's no doubt about that. But the environment in which those questions have been asked is not an environment where it's Julia Gillard versus Tony Abbott in the contest of ideas. There's a lot of other noise around. There's a lot of other distractions and diversions. And you can understand why people would say, well, hold on, get your show together. That is a fair enough comment. If we can get past this period, then it will be Julia Gillard and her ideas and Labor's ideas against Mr Abbott and his ideas, which I personally consider dangerous for Australia. That is my view. I think Tony Abbott is a danger to the country.
But the problem with that is, of course, is not just the polls in June. It's consistent polls over a very, very long time. And Kevin Rudd, in that sense, was right to say stop looking at alibis for the reason that the Gillard government is not doing well. I mean, the reason that Kevin Rudd continues to be relevant over all this time is that the Gillard government is not popular and has not performed well. And to say that's all Kevin Rudd's fault is ridiculous.
So where has the Gillard government performed poorly? You know, we're growing stronger than any developed country in the world. We're growing stronger than any developed country in the world. We've got massive education reforms, made sure low-paid workers get decent pay. We've put a price on carbon, and this is all really bad news. I mean, the alternative is this extreme austerity that Campbell Newman's practising in Queensland. Tony Abbott says they'll have a commission of audit after an election, and that's when they will reveal the cuts to spending that they say are essential for reviving an economy that is actually growing faster than any advanced country in the world.
I think it's very hard to argue the government's kind of economic management when you've got so many confusing messages coming out.
Performance
for example,
counts. Performance counts.
Exactly, performance counts.
Yeah, and where is it falling down?
There you have, for example, the idea of the budget, we're all going to be in surplus, and suddenly we've got $20 billion of surplus, and we actually do have an economy deficit, which is slowing down. Sorry, in deficit, and we do have an economy which is slowing down. You've got a bit of the overhang still going from the resources boom, that is clear, but that is going to end in the next couple of years or next year or so. You can see that happening already. What is taking its place is actually not clear at all, and I do think that people have lost faith in the government's ability to manage the economy.
Record low interest rates, low inflation. Record low interest rates, low inflation, unemployment about 5.5%. We're AAA rated by all international ratings agencies. Never happened in Australia's history. Our debt is 1/8 of that of the major advanced countries. And Australia, by the OECD itself, was rated the best country in the world 2 weeks ago. You wouldn't know it because it wasn't reported, not just on the economy, but a range of indicators.
the stream of talking points just for a minute?
There's no bits of paper here, Tony.
No, but I imagine...
And by the way, I take offence at that. I take offence at that. I come here with some ideas that I'm happy to share with your audience, and I will put those. The fact is that the OECD analysis rates Australia as the best country in the world.
Can I just ask, in that case, if everything is going so well, why are you being smashed in the polls?
Well, I think that there are.
Well, Tony, it could be worse. If you dropped into Australia and just heard 2GB in Sydney and read the Australian newspaper and listened to all that News Limited negativity about the government.
You've forgotten the Australian Financial Review, Mark.
Well, and Jennifer's column in the Financial Review.
Mark, is this as opposed to the positive write-up you're giving them tonight?
If I can just finish my comment, which is if you dropped in and didn't much about what had been going on, you'd think, oh, this contest is probably 65% for the Liberals, two-party preferred, 35 Labor. So the fact that it's around 55-45, I put down to two factors. The strength of the economy. People out there in the suburbs and the regions have never been more affluent, never been more employed, never been doing better in terms of small business formation. We do have the world's miracle economy. And all the rabbiting on about the politics ignores that fundamental fact about Australia, which I think is a terrible shame. And the second factor is the unpopularity of your mate Abbott, who's not well liked in the electorate, Malcolm. And you said that when you lost the leadership and gave him a good old pizzling, and what you said then was true.
Okay,
what you said then was true. So both those factors have brought it down to a tighter contest than you'd otherwise expect.
You do get a right to reply there.
I held great hope for you. I thought you were very encouraging in what you said about the climate change denial.
And then signed up with the direct action
very
plan.
good.
Well, I just look.
But then you turned.
Well, Tony, there's a. I think it was it Napoleon who said you should never interfere with your enemies when they're destroying themselves. So I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot that I can contribute to this sort of self-immolation down the other end of the table. But for Craig to say that the government is doing a fantastic job, the economy is being really well managed. I mean, look, let's be frank. We've gone through a huge terms of trade boom, a mining boom, and what has Labor left us with? A string of deficits, despite promising surpluses, despite guaranteeing surpluses. They've delivered deficit after deficit, the largest in our history and the largest debt in our history. I mean, it is the economic mismanagement of this country in a time of huge prosperity is one of the great wasted opportunities of our times.
Well, hold on.
That's Labor's legacy.
John Howard came in, and when he was in, we had a massive mining boom, and that was completely
squandered. And we paid off all your debt, and we ran surpluses.
And invested nothing.
You've had a massive mining boom, and you've spent all our cash, run up the debt, and run deficits.
Invested in infrastructure, invested in skills in this country, and the reason that the interest rates went up 10 times after John Howard promised in the 2004 election to keep interest rates at record lows, they went up 10 times because of so-called capacity constraints, which is just two words for skill shortages and infrastructure shortages. Yes, we have invested in infrastructure, including the national broadband network, which you bag really every day, and I think, well,
that's fabulous.
You ask the audience whether they're in favour of the national broadband network or not.
It's going.
Well,
the national broadband network's going so well.
I think it is a good investment in the nation's future.
Okay, here's a question.
Go back to the copper wire.
Here's a question. The national broadband network will be lucky if it meets 10% of its rollout target by 30 June this year.
Why would you tear it up? Why would you tear it up? No, you're a progressive guy. Why would you come in and say we're going to tear this up? Stop it.
It's not there to tear up.
You are not. There's nothing to tear up.
Correct. Okay, that's a point. That's a point for me to jump in and stop this side debate. You're watching Q&A. We're going to change the subject to a very different subject. The next question comes from Annie Nevin.